Hello, puppies and kitten. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. We're on Dos Chronicles, the 31st. Will this ever end? Anybody
Yes,
got
it will.
opening comments?
I can't say when it will end because it's God really never shuts up.
I mean, now we are. The next chapters are going to be about still Hezekiah. I mean, for 31 and 32, and then in 34, I think no 33 and 34 are going to be about. No, 33 is going to be about Manasseh and Amon. 34 and 35 about Josiah, and 36 about the rest of the kings, and then that's it. So
Huzzah!
yes, and then we'll move to Ezra Nehemiah, which is very very lovely. But
I
this chapter, yes.
I was going to actually ask Lawrence particularly because looking at this now with what I know now, obviously everything is all there's all these callbacks to David throughout all the writings of the kings, for and against. And looking back at it, I'm wondering how much of the stuff written about David was to sort of hype up and pseudo justify Hezekiah.
I mean, that's a good question. So I would, I don't know if we have much stuff outside of the Bible for this. I actually don't think that we do, but I would say that because maybe maybe I put it this way. I think that a lot of the David stuff, a lot of the David stuff, could have been to I think not exactly justified Hezekiah, mostly Josiah, I would say, but Hezekiah would have also been included in that because I don't see like a reason that any kind of reform would have been split other than like, okay, well, maybe you can argue that one didn't happen, but I think at least one of the reforms in some way, to some degree happened. Obviously, there was still plenty of like henotheism in the land, like that's archaeological fact. But the fact that there was any kind of push for these kinds of reforms, I think is important. I mean, definitely the point of Israel later on being unified under David, like obviously that's a later bullshit story. But when it comes to some of the other stuff, I mean, sure, I could totally see that as being like there's a word for it that I'm forgetting, but it is a narrative written to, I mean, you could say, I mean, it's propaganda. I'll just say it's propaganda because it is to justify something that's happening later. But I think that the only thing we can really say about the historical David is that he was just some warlord. I don't think, the stuff in here is very historical about him.
No, and he was a hero, a bit like a sort of a King Arthur legendary type of vibe, in some ways, in terms of like the stories told about him being not exactly from his time, although he obviously had something of a grasp on the imagination of the people. But yeah, I don't know, because the thing with Hezekiah, because Josiah, they're building up his legend somewhat on the basis of Hezekiah, and then afterwards sort of tracking them both back to David and saying that they did what pleased the Lord, just like David. And it's all very, it's very building a narrative for political purposes. Tyrion Lannister would approve.
I don't know who that is.
Shame.
Me neither.
I am amused. Okay.
Oh, and by the way, I'm drinking Beer Bazaar Israeli craft beer. This is wheat beer, so maybe more. I don't know.
Wheat. I don't want to... Wheat beer. How healthy.
Yes, exactly.
You're getting your bread in.
Yeah. I do like me some breakfast in the evening.
Liquid bread.
Oh, well, coffee hasn't entirely hit my brain yet. So, I was wrong about Vancouver Island. It's about the size of Belgium.
Okay.
Anyway.
All right, I am going to go ahead and read.
Yes.
Okay, thank you much. This is now when all this was finished, all Israel who were present went out to the cities of Judah and broke down the pillars, cut down the sacred poles, and pulled down the high places and the altars throughout Judah and Benjamin and in Ephraim and Manasseh until they had destroyed them all. Then all the people of Israel returned to their cities, all to their individual properties. Hezekiah appointed divisions of the priests and the Levites, division by division, everyone according to his service. The priests and the Levites to burnt offerings and offerings of well-being, to minister the gates of the camp of the Lord, to give thanks and praise. The contribution of the king from his own possessions was the burnt offerings of morning and evening, and the burnt offerings for the Sabbaths, the new moons, and the appointed festivals, as it is written in the law of the Lord. He commanded the people who lived in Jerusalem to give a portion to the priests and the Levites, so that they might devote themselves to the law of the Lord. As soon as the word spread, the people of Israel gave in abundance the first fruits of grain, wine, oil, honey, and all the produce of the field, and they brought in abundantly the tithe of everything. The people of Israel and Judah who lived in the cities of Judah also brought in the tithe of the cattle and sheep, and the tithe of the dedicated things that had been consecrated to the Lord their God, and laid them in heaps. In the 3rd month they began to pile up the heaps, and finished in the 7th month. When Hezekiah and the officials saw the heaps, they blessed the Lord and his people Israel, because God needs you to bless him. Hezekiah questioned the priests and Levites about the heaps. The chief priest Azariah, who was house of Zadok, answered him, "Since they began to bring the contributions to the house of the Lord, we have enough to eat, and we have plenty to spare, for the Lord has blessed his people, so that we have this great supply left over." Then Hezekiah commanded them to prepare the store chambers in the house of the Lord, and they prepared them. Faithfully they brought in their contributions, the tithes, and the dedicated things. The chief officer in charge of them was Conaniah the Levite, and his brother Shemaiah the second, while Jehiel, Azaziah, Nahath, Asahel, Jeremoth, Jozabad, Elielal, and Izamachiah, Mahath, and Benaiah
Very good. Almost perfect.
were overseers assisting Conaniah and his brother Shimei by the appointment of King Hezekiah and of Azariah, the chief officer of the house of God. Kor, son of Imnah, the Levite, keeper of the east gate, was in charge of the freewill offerings to God, to apportion the contribution reserved to the Lord and most holy offerings. Eden, Miniamin, Jeshua, Shemaiah, Amariah, and Shechaniah were faithfully assisting him in the cities of the priests to distribute the portions of their kindred, old and young alike, by divisions, except those enrolled by genealogy. Males from 3 years old and up, who all entered the house of the Lord as duty each day, required for their service according to the officers by their divisions. The enrollment of the priests was according to the ancestral houses, that the Levites from 20 years old and up was according to their offices by their divisions. They were enrolled with all their little children, their wives, their sons, their daughters, the whole multitude, for they were faithful in keeping themselves holy. And for the descendants of Aaron, the priests who were in the fields and pasture land belonging to their towns, town by town, the people designated by name were to distribute portions to every male among the priests and everyone among the Levites who was enrolled. Hezekiah did this throughout all Judah. He did what was good and right and faithful before the Lord his God, and every work that he undertook in the service of the house of God and in accordance with the law and the commandments to seek God, he did with all his heart, as he prospered.
By the
Yes.
way, this is the first chapter in the Bible with Jesus.
That's true. Oh no, wait, because Joshua.
Well, with
No.
the same spelling.
Oh, the same spelling.
There
The
literally is a
Yeshua.
character called Yeshua. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And I think it would be
Did
the same
the Christians
spelling that
have
you would-
something to say about this?
No. I mean,
You probably
What?
didn't notice.
There's nothing to tie it in.
Yeah.
But
When has that ever stopped them?
yeah. Oh, that's a good point, actually.
It's interesting that they don't like using the spelling Jesus for either Joshua or this character.
Right.
Joshua is
yeah.
Joshua.
it does make me
Joshua.
wonder.
But in the Septuagint, I think it is. I think it is Jesus for Joshua, rather than. Yeah, I think Joshua is like a later transliteration, I guess.
What verse was it again? 15.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out. Yeah. So, few things about this. The first, I think, the most important, right, is how they have organized the priesthood again. Now, notice who was it? Yeah, verse 10 there. The chief priest Azariah, who was of the house of Zadok. I think we've talked about this before, right? How there was this. I don't know if you'd call it. That's not really a. Yeah. I guess you'd call it a schism, where the Zadokites were vying for control. So I could see this kind of establishing a basis for that. And
Yeah.
notice
the
how, like,
two
people going
families.
into the priesthood when they're young, they're just establishing their own practice and saying, well, look, see this good king that he did it, so we should
Yeah.
do it too.
I don't think as well that it is stated in it is not explicitly stated that the high priests are Zadokites in Chronicles. I mean, at least not in the genealogy of
Right,
of
but you
the
do have,
priests in First
except
Chronicles
for
5:27, etc.
yeah,
Right?
but Azariah is explicit.
There are some priests by the name of Azariah, as we see in First Chronicles 5:35 and 36 and 39:40, 39 verses 39:40. But none of them are from Hezekiah's period. So I mean, Japhet suggested that the priest that is mentioned here is a literary character and not historical,
Well,
or that the name was
sure.
common among the priests of the Zadokites.
I mean, yeah. Either way, like there is. I think that that's saying who was of the house of Zadok. I think that by itself is a significant. What's the word? It's a significant apposition, I think.
Lilith.
Yes. Pretty Danger Noodle. I've been watching the Danger Noodle. I just wanted to. Oh, what's your name, little one?
Ozzy.
This is Ozzy.
Oh yeah, it is spelled the same as Jesus, by the way. Jesus. Yeah, it
I
is.
knew
Jesus,
it.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
And Joshua, right?
but
Are you the Prince of Darkness?
No, in the Septuagint, I think Joshua is also called Jesus.
Are you sober?
Like even the
I'm getting completely
Isn't anyone
confused.
truly sober?
Arn says
Is it
Ozzy,
the
and
book?
then Lauren says it's spelled just like Jesus. I mean, are you sure?
No, we're having two different conversations.
Yes, that's what I was
Yeah,
thinking.
yeah.
In fairness, any cool version of Jesus would rather hang out with Ozzy than Jerry Falwell, but
I hope he does. All well.
Martin, I've got a comment already. So, Bunny with a banner says, "Hey, Aaron, have you ever met or thought of working with Durante Lamar? Great guy, but a relative newcomer to the deconstruction scene of atheist YouTube." This is the first I've heard of him.
oh, he's good. He's
What?
very good.
He's
a
on the
former
line.
pastor.
Yeah. I was gonna ask, isn't the guy on the line?
He's been
I-
on a couple of episodes for sure.
Yeah, I don't have time to watch stuff, so I wouldn't know.
Mm,
You're not shunning him. You're just incredibly busy. I get
Yeah.
it. I could send you a couple of his shorts if you like. He's he makes really good points. Says a lot of things that honestly I've been saying for a long time too. But I had other stuff happen and didn't get around to my YouTube channel. So, but
Yep.
he's Yeah, he's got a lot of good points, and he has that pastor's education that brings in the point of. It might actually be interesting to see if he ever has time to come on this show.
Okay. All right, then we have Adam Puckett offered $9.99. Thank you. And then My Unfinished Journey says, "Hail Aaron and Co. and hail Jesus / not Jesus / Ozzy."
Yes. Oh, I love it.
Okay, so I think I'll start the commentary if nobody else has anything to say.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll start with verse 1. Klein comments, quote, "The opening clause refers to the events of chapters 29 and 30 and brings them to a close. A united Israel, which had celebrated a centralized Passover under Hezekiah's leadership, proceeded to carry out a reformation of the cult, both in Judah, not just in Jerusalem, and in the former northern kingdom, Ephraim and Manasseh. The chronicler was dependent for this information on 2 Kings 18:4a, which credits Hezekiah himself with removing... Sorry?
Oh, no, sorry.
Yeah.
Please continue.
Which credits Hezekiah himself with removing the high places, shattering the standing stones, and cutting down the asherim. Here, the work is done by the people as a whole and at their initiative. The same enthusiasm of the people is evident also in the generosity of their offerings, in verses 5 through 10. It would seem that it took prodding by Josiah to make all Israel serve Yahweh in his day in 34-33. By way of contrast, in 2 Chronicles 20, 32, and 33, it is the people who do wrong, not King Jehoshaphat. Quote, "The people had not yet set their hearts upon the God of their ancestors." End quote. Also, 2 Kings 18:4 mentions the destruction of the brazen serpent, aka Nehushtan, which Moses made at God's command in Numbers 21:8 and 9. Levin notes several reasons given for its omission in Chronicles. Rudolph suggests that the chronicler might have preferred not to have to mention that Moses created the Nehushtan in the first place. Japhet writes that what was still a matter of significance to the age had become an obsolete reference to the chronicler, with no need for repetition. Jonker writes that the mention of Nehushtan's very existence would have blemished, quote-unquote, the chronicler's image of Jerusalem, of the Zadokite priesthood, and of Moses himself. Klein writes that since the Nehushtan was not created by Achaz, the chronicler saw no reason for Hezekiah to dismantle it.
It's that idea of the people's generosity just overflowing when their overlords tell them to worship the new God. It seems a bit like the same thing as when they had the story about how the people renewed their vows to the Lord when they were about to enter the Promised Land, sort of setting up a narrative where all the people spontaneously did this thing we all want you to do last time, and God was really happy with them.
Yeah, I mean, Jewish children are even like brought up with this idea of like, when God asked the Israelites, will they accept the Torah the first time, he was like, they didn't like ask what's in it or whatever. They said, Na'aseh v'nishma, which means we will do and we will hear. So we'll do what you say, and then we'll listen to your rules and explanations or something like that.
They signed the contract without reading it.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. But they also say like it was the children that that said it first, and then the adults like followed afterwards. So like the little children that like are the pure and do what God wants sort of thing. And it's like,
oh, religions love that narrative. I got the same thing in Christianity. Unless you accept the kingdom of heaven like a little child, you will not enter it. It was always a way to get people to stop questioning and to be, subservient and wide-eyed and sweet and just take whatever the good leaders told us to believe, because we were like children and God loved it.
Yeah, and I guess also if you're brought up in a culture where the thinking skills of children or the children's ability to make decisions for everyone is so like bigged up that maybe that might foster some other things about whether children can make decisions for themselves or not.
Yeah, or consent to things. Yeah. There's lots of creepy implications, but in general, this, even without any of those implications, this idea of the spiritual purity and innocence of children has led to, unquestioningly believing them, and which case in trials of, witchcraft, which people didn't, some kids are indeed surprisingly honest and just have no pretension, and that can be a valuable thing, but that doesn't mean that they have good judgment. They're children. And religion has ever sought to take advantage of that and to try and encourage their followers to cultivate that within themselves for the glory of God and the salvation of their souls.
Okay, on verse 2, to give thanks and to sing praises at the gates of the Lord's dwelling. Japhet notes that according to the context, the singing, lehodot ve'lehalel, was associated with the gates of Yahweh's camps, b'sharei machanot Yehovah, but that is in contrast with what we know about temple singing in Chronicles. It was therefore proposed, based on Septuagint, to move the word to minister, lesharet, before at the gates, b'sharei, and read to give thanks, to praise, and to minister at the gates of Yahweh's camps, according to Rudolph. Or to move the words at the gates of Yahweh's camp after the word to minister, and read and to serve at the gates of Yahweh's camps, and to give thanks and sing praises. She suggested that the text is slightly corrupt, and suggested adding and the gatekeepers, omitted due to haplography, before at the gates, and read, quote, to give thanks and to sing praises, and the gatekeepers at the gates of Yahweh's camps. On verse 3, as written in the law of the Lord, Klein comments, quote, the reference to the Pentateuch, Torah of Yahweh, involves the types of sacrifices that are required, not the fact that the king supplied the animals. Compare 2 Chronicles 2:3, which is 4, and Numbers 28 and 29. Similarly, David appointed religious officials to minister before the ark and the tabernacle, at Jerusalem and Gibeon, respectively, in 1 Chronicles 16:37-40. In Ezekiel's vision of the future temple, the prince provides sin offerings, grain offerings, and offerings of well-being, in Ezekiel 45:17. Rudolph argues that Ezekiel is not the source of the idea of the king contributing animals for sacrifice, but notes that the Persian kings contributed in a similar way, in Ezra 6:9 and 7:21 and 22. According to number 7, the leaders of the people contributed various items for sacrificing. Since the temple in pre-exilic times was a royal chapel, it strikes me as quite likely that the kings did in fact contribute animals for sacrificing.
It's interesting to think of the first temple as being a royal chapel. That does seem to be a little bit more in line with the evidence. But the idea that it was this, this for all the people, no, like it was the king's thing. And granted, also, you can't expect animal sacrifices from everybody all the time. In a culture like that, eating meat is a bit of a rare treat. You do not get meat every day. The priests may have had barbecue for every meal, but the common people would not. The king, however, probably would. So he would keep, large
So they
stock
get to
of cattle.
they eat porridge and curds and whey and that sort of thing.
Yes. Let them eat
Gruel.
cake. By which I mean wafers, while I gorge myself on this triple rack of ribs, baby, because God likes him some blood.
You got to remember, like, most of it was they would only get like a portion of the sacrifice too, not even the whole thing, because they would, they would have to sacrifice most of it.
The people, you mean, or the priests?
No, the priests, even the stuff that they got, they would have to sacrifice most of it.
Well,
I mean that's at least part. At least in the was it in the Holiness Code? I forget exactly where it was.
They talked about it in the initial stories, initial, obviously not necessarily actually written earlier. It seemed to be about mostly offering the fat, particularly that which covered the innards, and the fat, so suet, and the other fat to the Lord, and then you could take the meat after. So you could actually eat most of the meat. Even though the shoulder would be a wave offering, which wave it before the Lord, and then you could still go eat it. So a lot of the meat would be eaten by the priests. elements of it would be burned in the offering. But they were still eating meat every day when everybody else was like eating meat maybe once a month.
I mean, I'm not exactly sure how often, but
I'm guesstimating on the how often other people would eat meat, but given the number of sacrifices.
yeah, this. I mean, it seems to be a pretty common thing among cultures that center around any kind of priesthood. You know, you give to the priesthood of whatever religion it is, honestly, to keep you safe, right? So
Yeah. And you feed them because they don't, raise their own cattle or care for their own lands because they're supposed to be doing the spiritual shit, which is fine, but they're still, oh, my eyes.
I mean, as I learned from Harvester, meat is the foundation of any decent society, and anyone who says otherwise is a commie. So on verse 5, Levin notes that grain, wine, and oil are considered to be the basic staples of the ancient world, listed together in the law of tithes in Deuteronomy 18:4. Honey was a luxury item and was specifically forbidden as part of an offering in Leviticus 2:11 and 12. This, however, did not preclude its being given to the priests as a food supplement. Klein writes that the generosity of the Israelites toward the central sanctuary and its clergy suggests that the chronicler had Deuteronomy 12:5 and 6 in mind. David and Solomon provided generously for the temple from their own wealth, as we see in 1 Chronicles 29, 1 through 5, and 2 Chronicles 9, 10, and 11.
Yeah, you don't want to burn honey. That doesn't smell good.
Yeah.
I'm not wrong.
No, you're not. Frying it, though. On verse 6, on Judah. The mention of Judah here seems odd, in light of the succeeding who resided in the towns of Judah. Several scholars, like Curtis and Madsen, Rudolph Williamson, and Klein, suggested that the and Judah is a mistaken gloss. Others, like Dillard and Japhet, retain the reading, since there is no textual evidence to suggest otherwise. Septuagint makes the words the subject of the previous clause, reading, "They too brought tithes of calves."
I feel like the argument of like, well, there's no textual reading to suggest otherwise is, it's hard to use that as an argument for most of the Old Testament, honestly, because we have so few things to actually base it off of, which is why most scholars base it off of like form or theology or some other grounds. Like for the New Testament, we have like a shit ton of manuscripts. So like there's like you can make those kinds of arguments. Like yes, we do have like the Dead Sea Scrolls, but that's not like.
And there's also a lot more contemporary material. You can say this is very similar to this thing that was written, 50 years prior and definitely in circulation as an educational manuscript and therefore probably influenced it. Whereas, with the Old Testament, we don't have that. We just do not have any of that.
Yeah, the Dead Sea Scrolls only show us so much.
Yeah. On that same verse, a tithe of the holy things dedicated to the Lord their God. Levin notes that this statement is problematic. The phrase seems to be based on Numbers 18:19, in which, quote, contributions of consecrated things, end quote, are given to the priests, but these are not called tithes. Pseudo-Rashi suggested that this was the tithe of the tithe, which the Levites give to the priests, as we see in Numbers 18:25 forward. Kimchi suggested that this was another sign of the people's generosity, since consecrated things are usually not tithed. Klein suggested omitting v'ma'asar, tithe, before the holy offerings, and should be seen as a mistaken doublet. In this case, the Israelites brought in the holy offerings rather than the tithe of the holy offerings. Rudolph suggested adding all the increase of the field, in Hebrew kol tevuat sadeh, before and the tithe, to read the tithe of all the increase of the field. This, however, is rejected by Dillard since it is implicit in the context. On verse 10, Azariah, the chief priest from the family of Zadok. Azariah is also called supervisor of the house of God, in Hebrew Nagit Beit HaElohim, in verse 13. The explicit mention of that Azariah was from the family of Zadok is unusual. Japhet notes that the priest's genealogy in 1 Chronicles 5:27 forward is based on the assumption that the high priests were Zadokites, but this is not explicitly stated for any of the priests mentioned in Chronicles. In that same genealogy, there are several priests named Azariah or Azariahu, as we see in 1 Chronicles 5, verses 35, 36, 39, and 40, but none of them are from Hezekiah's period. This is also the name of the high priest during Uzziah's time in 2 Chronicles 26:17. We also know of Azariah, son of Zadok the priest, as one of Solomon's chiefs in 1 Kings 4:2. She suggested that either this person is a literary figure or that the name Azariah was common in the house of Zadok. Klein notes that here, the high priest and the king work together, as the king's secretary and the officer of the chief priest did in 24 verses 11, 12, and 14. He writes that this is the chronicler's understanding of an ideal sharing of power.
Always a revealing statement.
Yeah. On 11 through 13, Japhet comments, quote, The administrative hierarchy is portrayed very precisely. The upper authority is that of the king and the chief priest, and they appoint two administrators, Konaniah and his brother Shimei, who in turn appoint 10 more officials by the authority granted them by the king and high priest. This is then a charge of the Levites by the king as defined in 24:11. The context of the repair of the temple under Joash is the second context in Chronicles, in which the same kind of cooperation between king and high priest is manifest. Together they take responsibility for the management of the temple, as we see in 24 verses 11, 12, and 14. This cooperation of king and high priest may reflect, at least to a certain degree, the situation of the Second Temple period. However, the relative significance of king and priest, with the latter playing a rather secondary role, would be surprising, since the king would then be represented by the governor appointed by the Persian ruler. While this kind of relative significance is attested also for the period of Nehemiah, it is doubtful whether this was the common balance between the two representatives of authority, especially in matters of the cult. It seems to reflect the chronicler's own view and inclination projected to the monarchical period.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been the case where they've had the temporal and the spiritual powers. And the thing with tithing is, people say it's just for greed. And if you actually believe any of the spiritual practices of your culture, it does make sense to pay the people who do it a wage, because from your perspective, they're fulfilling a role in the community and they should be able to live off of it. And that's all fine. Where it gets greedy is where, well, when it becomes excessive. Like, I've known pastors, most of them lived very, did not live well, like certainly no better than anyone in their congregation. They lived fine. They were like middle class maybe, but they had a house, they had kids, they didn't do anything special or have any excess. They definitely had to budget and things. Whereas you compare that with someone like Joel Osteen, that guy's just exploitative and full of shit. So, but here with the whole thing with the tithing, and yeah, it's balancing the powers. It's very difficult when you're locked in with these two powers that have to cooperate, but both of them kind of want to be on top, but they, the narrative is that they need to sort of share power, but so yeah, ideally they would cooperate. I'm sure we can imagine how often that happens.
Okay, on 16 through 19.
Sorry, just a second. I did want to say it's interesting how the tithes are more portrayed as a sort of charity rather than like a tax. And if there is no priest, you should still like give like 10% of your wealth income to the poor if you can. And there are other like similar things mentioned in the Pentateuch mentions payah, which is like the corner of the field, and if you
the
drop
Lord loves a cheerful
sheaf,
giver.
yeah, if you drop a sheaf of wheat, you shouldn't like go back to pick it up. You should just leave it for the poor. And like it seems that the tithes, even though they're it's for the Levites or the priests to do a job, it's kind of still shown as an act of charity, which I find interesting, rather than it being like a tax, like, oh, they're doing a job for you, you should pay them, blah blah blah.
Oh my god.
It's I guess they didn't want to complicate what the king was doing with what the priests were doing too much.
Well, the simpler they make it, the easier it is for the common people, and the less likely they are to rebel. Taxes may be necessary, but they don't need to be the headache that some places make them.
Right. I see what you mean. Like a tax is like everyone has to give tax, but like giving tithes is a bit more voluntary. You're not going to get in trouble if you don't do it. You just might be, it's more of a social thing, maybe.
Well, you won't be jailed, but people will still be like,
You'll be shit out of luck because God's gonna get you.
Yeah.
I've been daring him to get me. No dice.
I see some comments. Sorry, maybe we want to read them first.
Oh, there is?
Okay. All right, so we got Duke of Many Things said, Aaron, when are we going to get a reading of these frequently cited Annals of the Kingdom?
Never. They don't exist.
No.
Are they not written there?
They may have once existed. God
may
just
have
didn't
once.
think they were worth keeping around.
But it's a wonderful question, though, because it's done unanswered.
Mm.
My unfinished sock says, don't gatekeep. Like and share the stream instead.
And I think you've missed another one.
Oh, no?
On 16th minute?
No,
Or have you read
Arn got them all.
Yep.
Okay, I see. Sorry, I forgot. So on 16 through 19, Levin comments, quote, Kore had 6 assistants, presumably also Levites. The exact criteria for distribution are extremely unclear and understood differently by different commentators. But in general, both the priests and the Levites who lived outside of Jerusalem are assumed to have served in the temple in shifts and divisions, in exchange for which they received their share of the temple contributions. There were, however, differences between the two classes. For the priests, all males from the age of 3 were counted, listed by fathers' houses, i.e. hereditary clans, while for the Levites, only males from the age of 20 were counted, as instituted by David in 1 Chronicles 23-24, and they were listed by shifts and divisions. However, though only males were counted, each household also registered young children, wives, sons, and daughters. Sons presumably meaning those who were old enough to serve but not yet married, since once married they would be counted in their own households. In the final position are those designated by name, who were responsible for the distribution of the portions to priests and Levites throughout the land.
Levites throughout the land is interesting too, because in the era of judges, the Levites would go around performing spiritual duties for people in their respective areas. And very much you can see in the law and a lot of the things written here later, they're supposed to not do that. And everybody come to the temple. We're doing temple things now. So yeah, it sort of makes you wonder, where else would the Levites be living in the land that would be acceptable to the narrative that they're portraying here?
Mm-hmm. And finally, 20 and 21. These verses are similar to 2 Kings 18, 5, and 6, but the language is chronistic. Hezekiah is defined as someone who has done the good, upright, and faithful before the Lord his God, which Japhet notes is only given to Hezekiah among the Judean kings, and the only one who was faithful, in Hebrew, ha'emet, repeating again in 32:1. Dillard, following Williamson, writes that this summary serves as a literary marker. It ends the bulk of the material unique to Chronicles and marks a return to dependence on kings. And no ancient Christians.
Shocking.
Oh. So we're moving on to 32?
Yeah.
Who's reading?
I can read 32.
Yeah.
Please.
All right. Let's see. I guess I'll just do the whole thing.
Yeah, do it.
All right. After these things and these acts of faithfulness, King Sennacherib of Assyria came and invaded Judah and encamped against the fortified cities, thinking to win them for himself. When Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib had come and intended to fight against Jerusalem, he planned with his officers and his warriors to stop the flow of the springs that were outside the city, and they helped him. A great many people were gathered, and they stopped all the springs and the wadi that flowed through the land, saying, "Why should the Assyrian kings come and find water in abundance?" Hezekiah strengthened himself and built up the entire wall that was broken down and raised towers on it. And outside it, he built another wall. He also strengthened the Milo in the city of David and made weapons and shields in abundance. He appointed combat commanders over the people and gathered them together to him in the square at the gate of the city and spoke encouragingly to them, saying, "Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid or dismayed before the king of Assyria and all the horde that is with him, for there is one greater with us than with him. With him is an arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles." The people were encouraged by the words of King Hezekiah of Judah. After this, while King Sennacherib of Assyria was at Lachish with all his forces, he sent his servants to Jerusalem to King Hezekiah of Judah and to all the people of Judah who were in Jerusalem, saying, "Thus says King Sennacherib of Assyria, on what are you relying that you undergo the siege of Jerusalem? Is not Hezekiah misleading you, handing you over to die by famine and by thirst, when he tells you the Lord our God will save us from the hand of the king of Assyria? Was it not this same Hezekiah who took away his high places and his altars and commanded Judah and Jerusalem, saying, before one altar you shall worship, and upon it you shall make your offerings? Do you not know what I and my ancestors have done to all the peoples of the other lands? Were the gods of the nations of those lands at all able to save their lands out of my hand? Who among all the gods of those nations that my ancestors utterly destroyed was able to save his people from my hand, that your God should be able to save you from my hand? Now, therefore, do not let Hezekiah deceive you or mislead you in this fashion, and do not believe him. For no god of any nation or kingdom has been able to save his people from my hand, or from the hand of my ancestors. How much less will your God save you out of my hand? His servants said still more against the Lord God and against his servant Hezekiah. He also wrote letters to throw contempt on the Lord, the God of Israel, and to speak against him, saying, just as the gods of the nations and other lands did not rescue their people from my hands, so the God of Hezekiah will not rescue his people from my hand. They shouted it with a loud voice in the language of Judah to the people of Jerusalem who were on the wall, to frighten and terrify them, in order that they might take the city.
And we have to specify that they shouted with a loud voice.
Yeah, it had to be a loud voice, yeah.
Yeah, as opposed
They
to shouting with a
spoke.
whisper.
They spoke of the God of Jerusalem as if he were like the gods of the people of the earth, which were the work of human hands. Then Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz, prayed because of this and cried to heaven. And the Lord sent an angel who cut off all the mighty warriors and commanders and officers in the camp of Assyria. So he returned in disgrace to his own land. When he came into the house of his God, some of his own sons struck him down there with the sword. So the Lord saved Hezekiah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem from the hand of King Sennacherib of Assyria. and from the hand of all his enemies he gave them rest on every side. Many brought gifts to the Lord in Jerusalem and precious things to King Hezekiah of Jerusalem, so that he was exalted in the sight of all nations from that time onward. In those days, Hezekiah became sick and was at the point of death. He prayed to the Lord, and he answered him and gave him a sign. But Hezekiah did not respond according to the benefit done to him, for his heart was proud. It's all right, weird thing to do, but okay. Therefore wrath came upon him and upon Judah and Jerusalem. Then Hezekiah humbled himself for the pride of his heart, both he and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that the wrath of the Lord did not come upon them in the days of Hezekiah. Hezekiah had very great riches and honor, and he made for himself treasuries for silver, for gold, for precious stones, for spices, for shields, and for all kinds of costly objects, storehouses, also for the yield of grain, wine, and oil, and stalls for all kinds of cattle and sheepfolds. He likewise provided cities for himself and flocks, cities for himself and flocks and herds in abundance. Barely got any fucking sleep. For God had given him very great possessions. This same Hezekiah closed the upper outlet of the waters of Gihon and directed them down to the west side of the city of David. Hezekiah prospered in all his works. So also in the matter of the envoys of the officials of Babylon, who had been sent to him to inquire about the sign that had been done in the land. God left to himself in order to test him, he left him to himself in order to test him and to know all that was in his heart. Now the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and his good deeds are written in the vision of the prophet Isaiah son of Amoz in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. Hezekiah slept with his ancestors, and they buried him on the ascent to the tombs of the descendants of David. And all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem did him honor at his death. His son Manasseh succeeded him.
Interesting.
Yeah, lots of, the thing is, the account in Kings was already pretty, theological, right? But this is making it, way more explicit.
Yeah, but the account in Kings, because I was just looking back, the account in Kings is so much longer and includes so much more detail, including practical details that are verified. It doesn't talk about here how he stripped the gold from the doors of the temple and sent it off to bribe Sennacherib. But Sennacherib does record that he was bribed by Hezekiah, including with 2 of his daughters, as well as a lot of gold and silver and other shit. Oh, it's your little cute baby. Oh, that's right. Who's so cute? Anyway, the point is, they want to talk about how this angel came in and smote but he did this thing with the well, and honestly, if you're undergoing a siege or going to undergo a siege, cutting off most of the water to your enemy and keeping it inside the city, really good idea. Leaving them only one little outlet of water that you might also poison, also a good idea. These are actually strategically sound things. Bribing, obviously, but he still attacked and took a whole bunch of cities around. It's just he stopped at Jerusalem because he'd been offered enough bribery. But they want to imagine a giant angel came out of the sky and smote all the soldiers, and they all vanished, and everything went away.
Yeah, I mean, Sennacherib himself, he put up quite a lot of inscriptions that were found near the city of Nineveh. Mm-hmm. And he writes about Hezekiah the Jew did not submit to my yoke in his capital city of Jerusalem, but we do know, we know that he came back. Mm-hmm. And there definitely was the big battle in Lachish. I think you can actually see in the British Museum these Assyrian wall, what you'd call them.
Yeah.
It's
No, Hezekiah did rebel against Sennacherib. I'm not arguing that, but
Yeah. I mean, but
the magic narrative is
yeah. So it's interesting to see the what we have in one source, what we have in another source, and how they kind of contradict each other. But sometimes there is some bit of alignment, and yeah, it's there's also like, what was it else about Sennacherib? It was like, oh no, I'm thinking of another son of Hezekiah.
Lawrence, you were saying how theological the king's account is, because this one also doesn't include the boil and God magically moving the sun backwards in the sky to convince a king he wasn't going to die of a boil bit. That is not included in this. Yeah, well, could be.
Well, it's like God is thought to be involved in like every piece of this, right? Like explicitly. So there's of course references in the beginning of the chapter with my God has a bigger dick than your God, sort of thing. And it has a bigger dick than all the other gods. And then
it's the biggest dick. You've never seen one so big. You've never did it.
Right, yeah, it's unbelievable how big this dick is. So the and then you have this this angel being explicitly sent down to do all this. Let's see what else was there. What I found kind of weird, right, is with verse 24. In those days Hezekiah became sick and was at the point of death. He prayed to the Lord, and he answered him and gave him a sign. But he didn't. But then Hezekiah didn't respond. According to the benefit done to him, for his heart was proud. And then God, sent some wrath upon him in Judah and Jerusalem. That section's kind of weird to me because he is explicitly praying. He's asking for something, and then so if he's just ignoring the sign, I don't know. I feel like that'd be a weird time to ignore a sign, right? When you just prayed for it, kind of.
Yeah, well, and he did seem to get better. So it seems to be a case of
right.
He didn't thank God enough. He didn't give the priests enough. He didn't grovel hard enough. You know how God is. He knows what you need. He just wants to see you beg.
Yeah.
And after the fact, to grovel in gratitude and kiss his feet.
Anyway, love groveling. So.
Well, I know, but I don't think you'll like to be forced into it by a creepy asshole with an insecurity complex. Probably effective fishing.
Yeah, we will come back to this story in Isaiah. So
true.
But what I can't remember exactly what happened. Is it just a sun standing still again?
I mean, the sign isn't mentioned. No, it goes backwards 10 steps on the
shadow.
It's not mentioned at all. It's that it's not gone into in any theological detail the way it was in Kings. I should have been more specific in my comment there, but yeah, it's definitely not. This is a shorter version of the story, but obviously
just says
God
the
is the sign and
then the Babylonian emissaries coming to ask him about it.
Yeah, it seems a bit to take Second Kings kind of as read.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so I'll start with verse 1. According to 2 Kings 18, 9-12, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, captured Samaria because of Hezekiah rebelling against him in 2 Kings 18:7. In Chronicles, Sennacherib's attacks is not a response to Hezekiah's rebellion or a divine retribution for sinning, and appears to come out of nowhere, quote unquote. Instead of Kings, as in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Chronicles reads, after these deeds and faithfulness, referring to 31:20. Levin writes that what is important is not the chronology, but the sequence. Sennacherib's attack occurred after Hezekiah's deeds and faithfulness, in cleansing the temple and celebrating the Passover. He notes that Jarek emphasized that unlike most previous enemy incursions, which is a punishment for the king's sins, this invasion comes, quote, after these deeds and faithfulness, end quote. Perhaps, quote, staged by Yahweh as a marvelous way to facilitate an outcome through which the present king of Judah will be exalted in the sight of all nations from that time forward, end quote. Japhet and Klein suggested that after these things refer to Genesis 22:1, quote, after these things God put Abraham to the test, end quote, referring to the binding of Isaac, which might suggest that Sennacherib's attack was a test of Hezekiah.
Or that the officials from Babylon were a test of Hezekiah to see whether or not he would credit God with all his wealth while he was showing off. I'm guessing he didn't. God does love his petty little tests, doesn't he?
He sure does. So, on verses 3 and 4, Klein comments, quote, is the stream that flowed through the midst of the land the Jordan, or does this refer to the water that flowed through Hezekiah's tunnel? The generalities of verses 3 and 4 make it impossible to reconstruct Hezekiah's efforts in great detail. Williamson and Japhet think that verses 3 through 6 come from a source available to the chronicler, while Welton believes that the chronicler reconstructed the parts of verses 3 and 4 dealing with the supply of water on the basis of the source behind verse 30a. The rhetorical question with which verse 4 ends shows what the purpose of these water changes was. Sennacherib himself refers to his own efforts to change water resources in 2 Kings 19:24, aka Isaiah 37:25, quote, I dug wells and drank foreign waters, I dried up with the sole of my foot all the streams, Yeorei, of Egypt, end quote.
By the way, so we do have like archaeological evidence of waterways being dug under the city of Jerusalem. There's the tunnel of Siloam?
Yeah,
Shiloh.
Shalom Tunnel. Yeah.
Shiloach.
Yeah, Shiloach.
Yes.
Yeah, it's got that inscription in there.
Yeah.
So is it? Do we know for sure that it is Hezekiah's tunnel?
Well, that one's thought to be Hezekiah's. I don't think the inscription itself says that it's Hezekiah's, but it says that like there were a whole bunch of people building it, right?
Yeah, though I
they
do think
connected
that
the two sides?
it is dated to Hezekiah's times, if I remember correctly. Though I don't know if that's Levin's commentary that states this. That like this is not. It isn't really clear if this.
So it
refers
happened
to,
under his rule, but he may not have been quite so involved with it as they were making it out, because I mean, I'm sure he signed off on it. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying he wasn't like. It wasn't.
Yeah, but it's
his
also
baby.
possible that you might have inscriptions that don't mention the king's name. That we even have. There is another bulla from the late 8th century BCE that says like Amar Yahu, son of the king, and the Bible says that Hezekiah had a son called Amariah or Amariah.
Yeah, and
But
putting a project under, putting your son over a project, giving him some experience in managing something, and also a way to build credit. It's a totally reasonable teaching tool. And
I don't know if the bulla was found in the tunnel. I'm just saying
No,
from the same time period. Yeah.
I just meant the principle of the thing. I mean, it's, again, Lannisters, Tyrion building the sewer for his father's castle because it was below his father to build anything that low. Anyway, I'm gonna get more coffee, so I'll be right back.
Okay, on verses 7 and 8, commentators generally take Hezekiah's speech to be the chronicler's work. Japhet writes that its inclusion here fits the chronicler's method of adding rhetorical passages at crucial points in the story, and the people's response, making them full partners in the situation, is a major feature in the chronistic historiography. She notes that the style, language, and contents of the address reflect characteristic chronistic features, quote unquote, such as be strong and of good courage, do not be afraid or dismayed, al tira'u ve'al techatu, and horde, hamon, etc. On 10 through 15, the Assyrian speech is much abridged compared to the original, quote-unquote, of 2 Kings. Levin notes that while the two versions share the same basic claims, Hezekiah's reliance on God is misplaced, and that Hezekiah is misleading the people of Judah by insisting that they rely on God, the content of the chronicler's version is lacking some key rhetorical points that are found in Kings, such as the identity of the three messengers and Hezekiah's three officials, the futility of putting faith in Egypt, the claim by Sennacherib's messenger that Assyria was acting as an agent of God himself, etc. And Levin comments, quote, "These lapses, quote unquote, were not caused arbitrarily by the chronicler's abridgment of the text. The text as it is presents the Assyrians' message in a very different mode. According to the chronicler, the Assyrians' main mistake is in keeping, quote, of the God of Jerusalem as of the gods of the peoples of the earth, which are the work of human hands," end quote, in verse 19. In Kings, Sennacherib and Rabshakeh present themselves as God's messengers in a way that is almost credible. In Chronicles, they specifically speak against God, not for him. The Assyrians do not understand that the God of Jerusalem is not like other gods. The fact that other gods could not save their peoples is irrelevant. They are but, quote, the work of human hands, while, quote, the God of Jerusalem, end quote, is the real God. Hezekiah knows this, Isaiah knows this, the people of Jerusalem know this, and so hopefully do the readers of Chronicles. On verse 12, before this one altar. 2 Kings 8:22 reads, "Before this altar." Japhet notes that the change to "this one altar" has been pointed out repeatedly in research. Without considering its source, it proves that the first initiative for the altar's centralization was by Hezekiah, and D.H.'s favoritism towards Josiah made him the almost exclusive hero, quote unquote, of this cultic revolution. Septuagint preserves the King's reading, which leads Klein to suggest that the Masoretic text reading of Chronicles was by a later hand, but Dillard suggests that Septuagint assimilates to Kings. On verse 20, Japhet comments, quote, "Now comes Hezekiah's awaited reaction to all that Sennacherib has done so far. Quite unexpectedly, his reaction is recounted in an extremely brief statement. This extreme brevity becomes even more noticeable when compared to the chronicler's source on the one hand and his own description of other Judean kings on the other. We find in Kings a long reference to Hezekiah's deeds. Quote, "He rent his clothes and covered himself with sackcloth and went into the house of the Lord, and he sent to the prophet Isaiah," end quote, in 2 Kings 19:1 and 2. And his words and prayers are cited twice, in 2 Kings 19:3 and 4 and 15 through 19. The chronicler himself describes Asa and Jehoshaphat in similar circumstances. Faced with severe threats, their behavior and excited prayers are conveyed in detail, as we see in 2 Chronicles 14:11, which is 10 in the Masoretic text, and 23 through 20. Concerning Hezekiah, however, the chronicler not only refrains from elaborating on his reaction, but actually omits what already exists in his source. In the light of the chronicler's high opinion of Hezekiah and the miraculous divine response to Hezekiah's prayer in verse 21, this unusual brevity should be seen as a tribute to Hezekiah. His devoted behavior so far and his address to the people on this very occasion, in verses 7 and 8, are such a perfect expression of faith and trust in the Lord that nothing more need be said about it. A mere statement of his prayer suffices to initiate the Lord's response, expected and foreseen, in view of all that preceded it. On verse 21, Levin notes that this verse is based on 2 Kings 19:35-37 and Isaiah 37:36-38, though it doesn't mention the number of Assyrian soldiers slain by the angel, the name of Sennacherib's capital to which he returned, the name of the god in whose temple he was killed, or the names of either the two sons who killed him or the one who succeeded him. These details are not important to the chronicler, who is more interested in Sennacherib's demise as divine retribution for his derision of the Lord God of Israel, quote unquote. The chronicler adds Sennacherib's disgrace, quote unquote, prior to his death, which is quote, a fitting end for an enemy of the Lord, end quote. Targum identifies the angel as Gabriel, with some manuscripts identifying Michael and Gabriel, or Michael Gabriel, and adds, quote, "During the night of the Passover, he destroyed with a molten stream of fire and burnt up their breath within them."
Well, that's pretty badass. How come we never see that in the movies?
Yeah. Oh, and I
favorite
should-
musical artist, Michael Gabriel.
Yeah. No, as opposed to Gabriel Michael, totally different angel. You wouldn't know him. He lives
Oh,
in
and
Canada.
I should also know that on verse 1 of the Targum, it reads that when the Lord decided in his Memra to bring Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, and his armies against the land of Israel, so that he could smash the Assyrians in the land of the house of Judah and crush their forces on the mountains of Jerusalem, and give over all the booty and the spoil into the hand of Hezekiah and his people who were in Jerusalem. Behold, then Sennacherib, etc., etc. Yeah, so it basically claims that this was all God's plan to just smash the Assyrians.
Yes, that is how that works. Yeah, I mean that's
Yeah.
going to be that way with the Babylonians.
Yes.
Got Bruno Zygerts offers $5 Canadian, and says, "Our God is the real God. Then why doesn't He save you? He's punishing us."
I mean, it doesn't say that he has to save them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they should be just grateful for whatever crumbs he chooses to give, because that's what a real God does.
Or maybe the way that George Carlin put it, or maybe he doesn't give a shit,
Yeah.
which would explain a lot.
It would. And I also agree with him that God, if there is a God, is definitely a man, because no woman could or would ever fuck shit up like this.
I mean, history says otherwise. Just saying, not making a general comment. So on where was I? 24, yes, 24. The chronicler's account of Hezekiah's illness is significantly shorter than the account in the Vorlage of 2 Kings 20, 1 through 11, aka Isaiah 38, 1 through 22, omitting the exchange with Isaiah, who announced to him that he would die, the words of Hezekiah's prayer for healing, Isaiah's promise of an additional 15 years of life, and the sign connected to the sundial. Klein notes that many commentators have been dissatisfied with the laconic "and he answered him" Vayomer lo, and suggested reading Vaye'ater, he hearkened to him, based on Septuagint. BHS suggested adding "I will give to you healing" in Hebrew "Merape etena lecha," based on 2 Kings 25. "Behold, I will heal you, hineni rafalach," having been lost by Homo Acton before, and he gave him a sign, Hebrew "Vemofet natan lo." He adds that the omission of Isaiah's role was probably intentional, reflecting the chronicler's viewpoint that Yahweh communicated with Hezekiah directly, with no need for a prophet as an intermediary.
Or 5? Yeah, it doesn't seem to back that up, though, in the other story. In the other story, Hezekiah definitely needed God to send him a prophet. I mean, that was the whole thing about the what sign should the Lord give you? Send the thing back. Or here are your options. Okay, well, God, will you do the thing? And God does the thing. And, you know.
On 25 and 26, Levin comments, quote, "Verses 25 and 26 are somewhat puzzling. Verse 25 seems to state that Hezekiah was ungrateful for, quote, the reward that he received, for his heart was haughty, end quote, which brought God's wrath upon him, Judah, and Jerusalem. And then verse 26 says that since Hezekiah humbled himself, the Lord's wrath was postponed until after his days. The similarity of the delayed sentence, quote unquote, to the end of the pericope in Kings and Isaiah, the similarity of the delayed sentence to the end of the pericope in Kings and Isaiah is obvious. But where the context there is that of the Babylonian delegation, here that delegation had not yet been mentioned. So what was the reward for which Hezekiah was ungrateful? Dillard understands the sequence literally. No reason is given for the illness, but Hezekiah's recuperation is what causes his pride, from which he then must be humbled. Keel, citing Canticles Rabbah 4:8-3, suggests that Hezekiah had been too proud to give thanks to God for staving off Sennacherib, perhaps indicating that his illness had been a punishment for that pride, and that his humbleness was the condition for his healing. Japhet and Klein reach similar conclusions without the rabbinic source. since for the chronicler, disease is always a punishment for a sin already committed. Here, the reason for the disease must have been Hezekiah's pride, and his humbleness, the reason that his punishment was delayed.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. I still think, as the last time we did this, it pissed me off so much, because Hezekiah's like, oh, all your stuff's going to be carried away to Babylon. You're going to be destroyed. Oh, please, God, I'm so sorry. Okay, well, I'll do it after you're dead. Oh, great, all my people will suffer, but I don't see it, so it's fine. This is good. I'm like, fuck you. Just fuck you. Ugh.
On 27 through 29, Klein comments, quote, between his account of Hezekiah's illness in verses 24 through 26 and the Babylonian visit in verse 31, the chronicler describes the great wealth of Hezekiah and his attention to water problems. The chronicler may have deduced Hezekiah's wealth from the list of valuable things Hezekiah showed to his Babylonian visitors in 2 Kings 20:13, aka Isaiah 39:2. But Andrew G. Vaughan has also demonstrated archaeologically that Hezekiah undertook a general program of economic buildup that make the assertions about him in these verses plausible. Vaughan's exhaustive study of the Lamelech jars, for example, concluded that large numbers of them were stored at central locations, again making plausible the note in these verses about storehouses.
Storehouses are important. I mean, Jericho had storehouses, what was it, 6,000 years before the universe was created?
You could say that. On verse 30, this verse describes Hezekiah's main water project, the stopping of the spring of water of Upper Gihon and directing the waters downwards to the west of the city of David. Levin notes that the majority of scholars identify the Siloam tunnel with the water system described in Kings and Chronicles, and the tunnel has been firmly dated to the late 8th to early 7th century BCE. But most archaeologists would hesitate to claim that the tunnel can be dated precisely to 704 through 701 BCE, between Sargon's death and Sennacherib's arrival. As Japhet writes, quote, although the data seems authentic and reliable, much is left unclear and inconclusive when translated into concrete archaeological quote-unquote facts. On verse 31, the miraculous sign that had occurred in the land. In 2 Kings 20:12, the Babylonian delegation arrived, quote, because it had heard that Hezekiah was sick, end quote. Japhet writes that the chronicler chooses to view this visitation as a response of amazement, or even scientific inquiry, quote-unquote, of the sign, which Curtis and Madsen take as the Babylonians' interest in the study of the movements of the heavenly bodies. Dillard even calls this delegation, quote, magi inquiring about wonders in the heavens, compare Matthew 2:1 and 2, end quote. Levin writes that the sign, quote-unquote, could be Hezekiah's miraculous recovery from a near-death disease, and perhaps his great prosperity. Gersonides wrote that the sign was the destruction of the Assyrian army. Meyuchas and Butseko take the sign to be the declination of the sun, reported in 2 Kings 20, 10, and 11, aka Isaiah 39, 7-8, an interpretation favored by Klein.
That would make more sense for the Magi to come for that. Although it is always interesting to see yet one more way in which the tales of Jesus are just copycats of characters from the Jewish scriptures. So there you go. Totally real. Much believe.
I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it could have been that the chronicler was doing this on purpose because it would have been maybe something that people had brought up already. Like it was a question. Like if this great thing had happened, like the sun going backwards, someone would have noticed, and then the chronicler can be like, well, see, those bastards, they came to visit because of they saw it. So
well, and
there's your eyewitnesses.
Or just, some guys who, petty princes paying a local visit to, oh, your king is sick. We should send a card, except we don't have cards. So we'll send a minor delegation to send condolences.
Right. Like in Kings, it doesn't say that the reason the king says that the reason they visited was because he was sick, but then chronicler seems to change
Yeah.
it to make it make more sense, and like, well, obviously people saw
context
this
of the great sign.
crazy, yeah, like how come no one noticed it if it was such a
right,
great
and well,
sign, yeah.
and why would they have known that it had anything to do with him? The sun is visible everywhere on the earth, albeit not at the same time, and that would have been noticed. And it's not localized like the myth of the Star of Bethlehem, which also doesn't make any sense because that's not how stars work. But at least the
Well,
narrative.
I mean, if it was
think
late
they were
enough,
kind of-
if it was late enough in the day, then it wouldn't have been visible, let's say, in Babylonia. So they would have heard about it happening in the West, and then come out to inquire about it from the locals or something.
And finally, on that same verse, God left him to test him and to know everything that was in his heart. This note is not found in Kings, although most commentators take the test to be the visit by the Babylonians. The reference to God leaving Hezekiah is unclear. Targum states that Hezekiah showed them the stone tablets which were in the Ark of the Covenant. Pseudo Rashi, based on Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer 52, wrote that Hezekiah showed them the weakness of his whole house. Levin notes that Shinan and Zakovich argued that the chronicler, assuming that the reader would be familiar with the king's version of Hezekiah showing off his wealth, felt that Hezekiah had failed the test. However, Japhet and Klein claimed that within Chronicles, the test was successful, as indicated by the words, and also, relating to, and Hezekiah was successful in all his deeds. Keel suggested that Azvu, left him, actually means that God helped Hezekiah, based on Exodus 23:5, in which Azav means to help or to raise. Levin notes that if we take after these deeds in verse 1 as intended to hint at the binding story of Genesis 22, which was Abraham's test, quote unquote, we can assume that in the chronicler's thinking, the test was all of the events related in the entire chapter, including the attack by Sennacherib, the disease, the wealth, and the honor. He writes, quote, like Abraham and perhaps like Job, the faithful and successful Hezekiah was abandoned, quote unquote, by God as a test of his faith, and came through with flying colors.
How does God test faith, and why would you test faith? You're basically just arguing that are you credulous enough? Show me what impossible things you can believe.
It's actually a really well-established abuse technique. If you have time, energy, and wish to lose any faith remaining in humanity, there are certain types of men's groups that advocate, obviously blaming women for everything, but they advocate and will work out different abusive techniques to use to manipulate women into sleeping with them and staying with them. They, breaking down their mind and doing all this, breadcrumbing and manipulation and stuff. They're really fucked up. But they do exist, and they basically train each other how to abuse in the most effective way, and withdrawing and seeing what excuses they'll make for you. And yeah, there are games that involve that move. It's really fucked up.
Good.
Yeah, I'm done. No answer questions.
All right. So are we going to move on then to 33?
Yes. Finally, we're getting to Manasseh. The redemption of Manasseh, to be exact. Because
I'm going to guess that we're going to stop with 33. Right? Is that the Lawrence?
Yeah, that's the plan, because then we could
That's the
have
plan.
the next 3 chapters.
Yes.
And then we'll be done.
Yep.
With the Chronicles
For
at
now.
least.
Yeah. Okay. So Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, according to the abominable practices of the nations whom the Lord had driven out before the people of Israel. For he rebuilt the high places that his father Hezekiah had pulled down, and erected altars of the Baals, and made sacred poles, worshipped all the host of heaven, and served them. Worshipped all the host of heaven. we should discuss that. He built altars in the house of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, "In Jerusalem shall my name be forever." He built altars for all of the host of heaven in the two courts of the house of the Lord. He made his son pass through fire in the valley of the son of Hinnom, practiced soothsaying and augury with sorcery, and dealt with mediums and with wizards. He did much evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. The carved image of the idol that he had made, the carved image of the idol that he had made, he set in the house of God, of which God had said to David and the son of Solomon, "In this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever. I will never again remove the feet of Israel from the land that I appointed for your ancestors. If only they will be careful to do all that I have commanded them, all the law, the statutes, the ordinances given through Moses." Manasseh misled Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that they did more evil than the nations whom the Lord had destroyed before the people of Israel. The Lord spoke to Manasseh and his people, but they gave no heed. Therefore, the Lord brought against them the commanders of the army of the king of Assyria, who took Manasseh captive in manacles and bound him with fetters and brought him before Babylon. And while he was in distress, he entered the favor of the Lord, his God, and humbled himself greatly before God, the God of his ancestors. He prayed to him, and God received his entreaty, heard his plea, and restored him again to Jerusalem and to his kingdom. Then Manasseh knew that the Lord was indeed was God. Afterward, he built an outer wall for the city of David, west of Gihon in the valley. Reaching the entrance at the fish gate, he carried it around Ophel and raised it to a very great height. He also put commanders of the army in all fortified cities in Judah. He took away the foreign gods and the idol from the house of the Lord, and all the altars that had been built in the mountain in the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, and he threw them out of the city. He also restored the altar of the Lord and offered on it sacrifices of well-being and of thanksgiving. And he commanded Judah to serve the Lord, the God of Israel. The people, however, still sacrificed at the high places, but only to the Lord their God. Now, the rest of the acts of Manasseh, his prayer to his God, and the words of the seers who spoke to him in the name of the Lord God of Israel, these are in the annals of the king of Israel. His prayer and how God received his entreaty, all his sin and his faithlessness, the sites on which he built high places and set up sacred poles, and all the images before he humbled himself. So these are written in the records of the seers. So Manasseh slept with his ancestors, and they buried him in his house, and his son Amon succeeded him. Amon was 22 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 2 years in Jerusalem. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, as his father Manasseh had done. Amon sacrificed to all the images that his father Manasseh had made and served him. He did not humble himself before the Lord, as his father Manasseh had humbled himself, but this Amon incurred more and more guilt. His servants conspired against him and killed him in his house. But the people of the land killed all those who had conspired against King Amon, and the people of the land made his son Josiah king to succeed him.
Yeah, why would the people of the land be so evil as to kill violent conspirators who committed treason? How dare they?
Yeah. So redemption of Manasseh here. So this is discussed heavily in Francesca Stavrakopoulos' book, King Manasseh and Child Sacrifice.
Oh, I got that one.
Yeah, I think it's her dissertation.
Nice.
So there is, it's a pretty dense read, but I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff in here. It's hard to pick out specific notes, but the the idea that Aaron, you're talking about worshiping the host of heaven, right? So this was always supposed to be it was God's army, but it was also the stars, because the stars were thought to be divine beings. So worshiping the stars. Assyria was one of the many cultures that did such a thing, and in every single way, Manasseh was just a vassal for, he was a vassal of Assyria. We already know that one. But there is no indication that he went against his masters in some way. So these idolatrous practices are just references to things that he would be doing under the vassalage of Assyria.
Right. He didn't fight his captors on, including one of their gods in his shit.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, which I didn't mention earlier and I should have, when Sennacherib came against Hezekiah, he said to the people, did Hezekiah not tear down the high places of the Lord? He didn't just say the high places, but specifically that high places had belonged to Yahweh. So it's a residue of how this worship only this one God, only in this one temple, and nothing else ever is a new innovation. And so for any other king at any other time, including another god in your temple, and just oh yeah, we'll also set up a little shit for this dude. Cool. Pay your respects. It was not a big deal.
Yeah, it also seems to be showing some bit of a evolution of the people kind of being taught different things over time. So eventually, at some point, even without the king and the priest are telling them what to do, they've become monotheistic or henotheistic, where they're still doing their old practices with high places and stuff, but they're pretty much only worshipping Yahweh at this point, according to Chronicler anyway, without the king kind of telling them to.
Although the
just
people
doing it
at this
wrong.
point seem a bit like the Greek chorus, they're very much just a collective character in the background. We are all doing this, and then the gods smite, and then we're all doing this, and then the gods are happy.
Right. Yeah, I'm just saying, there seems to be the chronicler seems to be chronicling some evidence of this development over time, where if not for the centralized government sort of thing enforcing this specific cult, the people were just pretty much polytheistic. But it seems that they've kind of developed by this point to become maybe henotheistic, where they're worshiping Yahweh, but they still believe that the other gods may also exist, but they don't really worship him anymore.
But they still use the high place for the worship of Yahweh. I mean, it's a bit same sort of, not same phenomenon, but same principle as when the Catholics took over the Celtic lands, and then Bridget went from being a goddess to a Catholic saint.
Yeah, I mean, it's still possible that that they were influenced by the cult of Yahweh, the priesthood and everything, and that's why they became they became more henotheistic over time, rather than something that they developed by themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Then the cult kind of become centralizing themselves in one location.
It's definitely involved and goes back and forth quite a bit.
Yeah. Another thing is, so in this story, we have Manasseh kind of is bad, and then he gets taken away to Babylonia or whatever, and then he comes back because he's good. We don't really have any evidence, archaeological evidence, that he was ever captured and returned or anything. But there is some interesting, because Hezekiah was Sennacherib attacked him, and then he resisted. But then by the time we get to the next generation, the next king, Manasseh, we see that the one who, I think the son that killed Sennacherib, I don't know how much evidence we have of that. But
I mean, according to the according to at least I think Levin writes that the Syrian sources state that Manasseh was a loyal vassal of Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal. Sorry, it's Japhet actually.
So Esarhaddon himself wrote in his writings, he mentions that he has a list of kings who helped him aided his conquest of Egypt, and one of the names on that list is Manasseh.
Yeah, I don't think
to at least send
Yeah.
some supplies or men or whatever.
And yeah, I mean, Ammon not even mentioned. We don't have anything in the archaeological record. There's no mention of Ammon at all. It could be he wasn't around that long. Josiah, we don't have anything explicit. I think there's only one thing where it says something like, what was it? Amasia, maybe? Again, similar to the other guy that I mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, not Amasia, Asaya or Asayahu, the servant of the king. So in Kings it mentions him by name, and then we have a seal with that says Asaya, servant of the king. It doesn't mention Josiah, but if it is the same Asaya character, then the king in question would be Josiah, and that's the closest we have for Josiah.
Well, even in here, it mentions that he only reigned 2 years. So
Ammon,
that is Ammon, not Josiah, obviously. But that is clearly not exactly breaking any records for longevity. And he did get stabbed, so I'm assuming he didn't do all that well with the ruling.
Yeah. And we also have nothing for Josiah's successor and the next one, Jehoiakim, sorry.
Spoilers.
Which makes I'm saying we also don't have spoilers. Yeah, their names will appear.
I mean, we've already had them in Kings. So
yeah, that's true. And they also don't have a very long reign, so that makes sense. But it could also lead credence to the idea that the Josiah was this young boy when he became king at the age of 8. But not only that, but he was also in a very weakened position, probably the weakest that the state, the kingdom had been in since, in the legendary days of David or whatever.
Yeah.
It was so it makes sense kind of that the priests were able to take control over him.
Oh yeah, I mean it sometimes gets mixed up with the story of Josiah being raised by the priests and all of that, which is a different story. But you do get this child being brought to power and the priests anointing him and pretty much ruling through him until he gets old enough to have an opinion, and then he turned away from the Lord. It's almost like God likes people who have no critical thinking or skills.
Got a handful of comments here. We have Ralph says, serious question. How much truth is there in the idea that many copyist monk scholars were illiterate and merely drew letters?
What?
I haven't heard that.
No.
I know they zoned out sometimes because
they did. Yes,
they drew pictures.
They're definitely not illiterate. Like the thing is, the copyists were always very well trained in this because it was such a rare thing in the ancient world. So no, I don't. No.
All right, next comment. Kip Davis says Manasseh was probably very successful.
I wonder where Kip Davis is. Wonder where that guy's at.
Huh, Kip.
Yeah.
Anyway, to get to the question, says Manasseh was probably very successful precisely because of his diplomatic relations with Assyria. I tend to read the injunctions of Dear against idolatry as responses to foreign policy.
I think he's talking about Deuteronomy, the Deuteronomistic historian.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And I would agree. I mean, definitely they tend to see any cooperation with foreign powers, even completely necessary cooperation when they have literally no other options, to be some sort of a betrayal of God and country and the covenant because we should be supreme. And it's this supremacist ideology that really destroys the country over and over because they keep rebelling when they have, there's no strategic advantage to doing so. They are not prepared. They are not anything, it's not going to work. And they're still like, no, fuck you. We're the chosen people and our God is the biggest. And just smush.
Okay. And then we have Jamie Wells who says, I played your disproving Noah's flood video for my zealot cousin, and the look on his face was priceless. Just wanted to tell you that, Aaron. Well, thank you for that.
Which one?
Yeah, there's a whole playlist.
There's a whole, yeah. Maybe it's the more recent one.
I don't know which one. There's 12 in the playlist, so I have no idea.
Maybe it was whichever one was relevant to whatever ridiculous claim the poor cousin was making at the time.
We'll never know. Okay, and then Kip Davis says, in my book, I contrast the Yahweh alonists with the Baalim idolaters in the perspective of isolarianists or globalists.
Isolarianists. Yeah.
No, he probably means isolationists.
Isolationists. Yes.
Yeah, because that would go against globalists quite well.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of, maybe Kip is already aware that we actually have Manasseh's prayer in the Qumran's scrolls. Specifically, it's 4Q 381, I believe.
Yeah, maybe Kip is aware of that.
Yeah, maybe. He never says that he has.
We
I mean,
wouldn't
I've asked
know,
him.
would we?
Is
Yeah.
that is that what you would call like a pseudo? I don't know what's the word, canonical,
Pseudepigraphal?
deuterocanonical, or
I mean, it's
apocryphal?
I think it would be pseudepigraphal, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, most likely. I mean, I think some people claim that I think most scholars claim that it is Greek in origin, though the one in Qumran is in Hebrew, and I have Levin's comment, who writes that he notes that Schneiderwind's proposal that this prayer was actually composed before 2 Chronicles 33 and served as its source has been rejected by other scholars who considered it too to have been influenced by our narrative. So yeah.
Incidentally,
I do-
in the comments, Jamie Wells mentioned that it only took one to show his cousin for I don't know if it was for him to deconvert, but definitely for him to blue screen. So
Yeah, start
Huzzah!
It's so silly. Yeah.
I would like to know. I would like to know what the ultimate situation is. Was it just a blue screen, or did they start figuring out there was no flood?
I will say from personal experience, deconstruction of a false idea that you've been taught you have to rely on takes a little while, so we may have to be patient, but please do keep us updated.
Yeah, I would love to hear more. But also, Kip says that the reason he's not here is because he has to get ready with the show with the dinosaur. You know what? Kip, get me on that show. That's all I'm saying.
And I quoted on my Discord about the Manasseh's prayer.
Excuse me, what now?
Deal with it. So there is an article by good. So there's an article by Mika Espajunen, I hope I pronounced it right, or Pajunen, I don't know. The prayer of Manasseh in 4Q 381 and the account of Manasseh in 2 Chronicles 33. He writes that the 4Q 381 prayer gives a glimpse at how the earlier traditions related to Manasseh in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles are received around the middle of the 2nd century BCE. It looks probable that the author of the 4Q 381 prayer knew both of the earlier accounts and added to them the views of his age or his group. He takes the setting of the prayer from the Chronicles, but is quite liberal in how he uses the Chronicles as a source. The story is certainly in the background of all the time, but except for a few expressions, the author does not use the specific vocabulary of Chronicles or Kings. It feels safe to assume that he is not using a literal source in front of him, but is alluding to the earlier texts from memory. He apparently shares the view of the chronicler that Manasseh repented, God saved him, and he mended his ways. Oh, and I should note that Josephus also has a bunch of editions about Manasseh's story. So this is from Blair French's commentary on the history of the reception of Chronicles. I think it's around in Antiquities 38 through 45. She notes that according to Josephus, when Manasseh was imprisoned, he prayed that God would make the enemy humane and merciful to him in Antiquities 10:41. When God heard his plea and returned the king to Jerusalem, Manasseh hastened to change his mind and exhibit such a change that, for as long as he continued to live, he was regarded as the most blessed and inviolable, end quote. Yeah.
It is interesting. I remember being fed that narrative too, although it's a bit absurd to think that he was, cooperating with the ruling power, and then they dragged him off and tortured him, and then he stopped cooperating and started doing what God wanted, which is being a dick, apparently. But yeah, it's not really justified in the text, this idea that he was dragged off and put in a cell for some length of time. Or was that another king? Oh, so many stories.
Do you have any more
Also-
commentary, Tomer?
Yeah. Yes. Of course, Aaron. Of course. I never stop. So yeah, it should also be noted that there is a tradition where Manasseh actually kills Isaiah. I don't know if that's I think the rabbinic sources caught on to that, but it actually appears, I think, in the Ascension of Isaiah, which is an apocryphal text. In and I think in
fun.
also in yeah. So again, French writes that before Manasseh is even born, Isaiah tells Hezekiah of his son's wickedness. Manasseh bears out the prophecy the moment he becomes king by abandoning God to serve the powers of evil. Isaiah, fearing for his life, flees to a desert mountain, but to no avail. Eventually, Belkira, a false prophet, discovers him and claims that Isaiah himself is prophesying falsely. Manasseh seizes on the charge, condemns Isaiah to death, and saws the prophet in half, which is, yeah, very, very, very cool.
But then he turned the table around and then he put him back together, and the audience applauded.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't think Isaiah had the legs for that move. You really want the pretty girl in the tight outfit, right?
Yes, and also it appears in second Baruch, in which he is repudiated there as well. He repents, but the act is hollow and self-serving. It also purports to be So in Baruch's vision, 6 black waters alternate with 6 bright waters, each corresponding with bad or good figures in Israel's history. Manasseh is the 9th black water, and his abominations have now grown to include his marriage to women who had been violently polluted and the expulsion of priests. Kings and Chronicles mentions that Manasseh carved his own idol in 2 Kings 21:7 and compare 2 Chronicles 33:7. In 2 Baruch, Manasseh goes further and fashions his creation to be an explicit affront to God. The idol has 4 faces pointed to the 4 winds, plus a 5th face on top, quote, as an opponent against the zeal of the Mighty One, end quote. Manasseh's wickedness eventually becomes so great that God's glory leaves the sanctuary. Yeah.
So,
FYI, we do have a reading of Second Baruch on my channel. So if you guys want to go,
what? I might watch that this afternoon if I have time. The
thing is, Second Baruch is pretty long, and it's filled with a few very strange visions. Some harder to interpret than others. But yeah, there's definitely some interesting stuff in there.
I just love the implication that the Spirit of God can be driven out by titties.
Yeah.
I am not, damn it, I will do whatever I can. I will not be pure in the sight of the Lord. So here I am. Ooh, I'm sending the Spirit of God away. We are now all purified of the invasive presence of Yahweh.
Clip it, chat.
Yeah. I don't know if I should include also the early rabbinic commentary. I mean, French has a long one, but it's like I think the opinions about him are varied among the commentators. Some say that his sins were so great that even his repentance hasn't worked, something like that.
I thought that, I don't know, the stories. I mean, the version I was told, the kid breakdown for us meant that he displayed his repentance as being very sincere and authentic, and maybe he was the one who taught Josiah the importance of devotion to Yahweh, because by that point his son was obviously shitty, and that's why he got murdered. Struck down by the Lord in the form of tantruming assassins.
How come he didn't teach his son? What's the explanation?
Maybe when his son was growing up, he was still evil, and then he was good. But his son was already grown and corrupted. But, he could save his grandson by being really virtuous. And Sure, there was nothing creepy there.
Yeah, and also the Christians, in contrast to the rabbis, overwhelmingly accepted his repentance. So I'll mention that when I finish the commentary. Some of them, at least. I mean, there's again French's remarks are very extensive.
So there are multiple opinions, but the general consensus seems to be sincere.
Yeah. I mean, there are some like I think Theodoret, if I remember correctly. I don't know. But yeah, some. We'll get to that. Maybe. Why do I hear my own voice?
I don't know. I was just wondering that. I was like, what the hell?
Well, that's
Peter?
Do you?
Maybe it's Peter.
yep.
I can't work like this.
This is actually atrocious.
Okay, it's not me. Tomer, mute yourself. Let's test that.
Is
No,
Peter?
Aaron.
Is Peter even here?
All right.
It's Peter.
Can you give me a moment to myself?
Peter.
He's dead.
Yep.
Peter's dead. He had a heart attack.
Peter, you're not allowed to die. I forbid it.
Well, this is unworkable.
Yeah.
I think chat also hears that, right?
Yeah, they also hear that.
Chat, can you hear the echo?
Atrocious.
Where the fuck is it? Oh, sorry about that.
You know, Tomer, you're a musician. You can use this reverb for something, right?
Yeah.
Oh, the chat says they are not hearing the echo.
You're not hearing an echo?
So it appears to be no. We sound totally fine to them.
Okay, I guess it's crazy.
So-
Sound crazy.
Peter put in a note that he had to step outside for a moment, and so we're stuck at this now.
Right. Okay. So you guys don't hear an echo, but immediately as we're speaking.
No. Oh, there they go. There you go. It stops. It stopped.
Okay.
Yeah. Peter had to take care of his puppy dog, so it is forgiven.
Okay, so we are not moving on to what?
I mean, I think you lost it, Darren.
Say it. Say it.
Say
לא
it.
סיימתי את הפרשנות שלי.
Tomer,
Yeah. Yes, Mr.
say your line
I said it. You probably didn't
in
understand it.
English.
Fine.
I
haven't
understood it.
finished my commentary.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'll start with verse 1. 2 Kings 21:2 states that Manasseh's mother was Hephzibah. From here on out, the chronicler does not mention the king's mother's name as he had done before. Klein notes that McKay has argued that the mothers of Manasseh and Ammon were of Edomite or Arabian background and were hence omitted. He writes, however, that more likely is that the chronicler changed his pattern of birth and death notices from here to the end of the book. Levin notes Baines' opinion that the omission of the mothers of all the kings after Hezekiah is a literary device that accentuates Hezekiah's reign, which serves as a climax to the post-Solomonic Judite history. Dillard writes that the author's reasons are simply unknown to us. On verse 3, two notable changes occur from 2 Kings 21:3. 2 Kings 21:3. One, the Baal and Asherah, singular in Kings, are plural in Chronicles, Baalim and Asheroth. Two, Chronicles lacks the remark, as King Achab of Israel had done. The comparison to Achab is retained for Jehoram in 21:6 and Achaziah in 22:3. Dillard argues that in Kings, this comparison was appropriate. Manasseh represented the nadir of the south, as Achab had been in the north. For the chronicler, Achaz represented the nadir of Judean kings, who was Achaz for the chronicler, and he may have omitted the comparison as part of his effort to rehabilitate Manasseh. Japhet argues that the chronicler perceived the comparison to be immaterial. on verse 6, Japhet Japhet comments, quote, "This verse is a clear reflection of Deuteronomy 18:10. To Manasseh is attributed the trespassing of almost all of the expressed prohibitions, which was never attributed to any other monarch in such accumulation. These matters refer to the realms of human sacrifice, and but it is unclear if this actually refers to human sacrifice, as I put it by note, and various practices of sorcery. The chronicler transmits the verse as it is with 3 changes. He turns the singular son into the plural sons, and the name of the place in which this abominable cult was performed, the valley of the son of Hinnom, in Hebrew Gay ben Hinnom, is added, taken from the record of Josiah's reform in 2 Kings 23:10. And thirdly, to the pair soothsaying and augury, in Hebrew Onen v'nichesh, the chronicler add sorcery, kishef, in closer similarity to Deuteronomy 18:10. On verse 7, the image. Masoretic text reads, Pesel HaSemel. The word semel appears in Deuteronomy 4:16, Ezekiel 8:3, and here, each referring to a sort of image, though its exact meaning or etymology is unclear. Levin notes that Albright suggested relating it to the Akkadian similitu, staircase or slab/orthostate, but has not received wide acceptance. The word appears in a few Phoenician inscriptions with the same general of image, human or divine. 2 Kings 21:7 reads, Pesel ha'asherah, carved image of the Asherah. Klein notes that in Ezekiel's second vision, he saw the image of jealousy that provokes to jealousy in the temple, in Hebrew semel hakin'ah hamakineh, and suggested that the chronicler may be dependent on Ezekiel for this term here. Levin suggested that by avoiding the name of the goddess Asherah, the chronicler mitigates Manasseh's sin. One could understand that the semel is but an icon of Yahweh, certainly a forbidden practice, but not so terrible as the actual introduction of a foreign deity into the temple.
God is so sensitive.
You could say that. On verse 9, Klein notes that the chronicler changed the text of 2 Kings 21:9 in 2 ways. 1, he delays the notice that the people did not listen to the next verse, expressing it with a different verb, kashav, did not pay heed, instead of shama. 2, he specifies that it was Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem that Manasseh misled, not just them, quote-unquote. He further writes, quote, the comparison with the nations at the end of the indictment in both Kings and Chronicles echoes the charge at the beginning in verse 2. But now both Kings and Chronicles charge that the sins of the people are even worse than those of the nations, confirming that they should experience the same fate as the pre-Israelite nations. Kings maintains that verdict at the end of the book, but Chronicles cancels it, at least temporarily, because of the conversion of Manasseh that follows. On verse 10, the chronicler omits 2 Kings 21, 10b through 16, instead summarizing it in one sentence. Yahweh rebuked the people, but they did not listen to him. Japhet notes that the mention of the existence of a prophetic speech without quoting it, and the mention of its inattention, represent two aspects in the historical view of the chronicler. On the one hand, he avoids quoting a Deuteronomistic theology, which several of its aspects are against his viewpoints. According to the chronicler, divine justice does not include delayed punishment or cumulative sin, and thus he cannot agree with the historical circumstances presented in 2 Kings 21, 10 through 16. In his opinion, the temple was not destroyed because of Manasseh's sins or the cumulative sin of many generations, but because of the sins of Zedekiah's generation. Regardless, a prophetic speech is a sort of warning, which is the main principle of the divine guidance of the world. She writes, quote, by mentioning the prophecy and the fact that the people did not listen to it, the chronicler redesigned the Deuteronomistic story into his theological mold.
Yeah, it's interesting and quite common to see people with one theological perspective glossing over elements that don't line up with that. And well, of course, it would be more just, of course, for God not to destroy a city because your great grandpa pissed him off somehow. Nothing in his behavior thus far has been particularly just, so I don't know what you want from me.
On 11 through 13, Levin notes that there are two schools of thought regarding the historicity of Manasseh's exile. One, the story is an invention of the chronicler, designed as a precursor of the capture and exile of Jehoiakim. And two, there must have been some real historical event behind the narrative. Proponents of the former theory include Myers, who, while admitting that it may be possible that Manasseh was summoned by either Esarhaddon or Ashurbanipal and then returned to Jerusalem, thought that the entire episode was invented by the chronicler as an explanation for Manasseh's long life. North concluded that Manasseh was never summoned to Mesopotamia, after analyzing the Assyrian documents which mention him, and Handi concluded that the reality of Manasseh's exile is probably nil, quote-unquote, seeing the story as a precursor of the Babylonian exile. For the latter theory, Ben-Zvi provides a list of bad kings who ruled longer than good kings, reminding us that, quote, while longevity and a long regnal period are a blessing, not all pious were blessed this way. And conversely, not all sinners had to die, end quote. Klein, after presenting all the main issues in the debate, even giving 8 possible occasions in which Manasseh could have revolted against the Assyrians, concludes, quote, all are agreed that there is no direct Assyrian evidence to back up verses 11 through 13, and most believe that Manasseh's acts of repentance are the chronicler's theological interpretation of whatever historical event may lie behind those verses. The long quest to find indirect evidence for this event in Assyrian sources aims to make it plausible that Manasseh was taken captive because of rebellion against Assyria, and that he then was reinstated after his imprisonment, perhaps to shore up Assyrian interest in Palestine and or over against Egypt. In my judgment,
Which doesn't
this
make
limited
any sense.
In
Sorry,
my
go ahead.
judgment, in my judgment, this limited goal of showing the plausibility of verses 11 through 13 is somewhat successful, but that is about all one can say on the basis of the data now available.
I mean, it doesn't make sense because they're condemning him for not being rebellious enough and being inclusive of the gods of his, of the ruling power at the time. So, yeah, he's one of the few that didn't rebel, which of course means that he did evil in the sight of the Lord. God doesn't like peace or harmony or cooperation or reasonable decisions made in a difficult situation. He just likes piles of dead people.
Don't we all?
I suppose I would be prettier covered in the blood of my foes, but it's early.
I guess. Okay, on 12 and 13, Japhet comments, quote, a distress may serve in principle in 2 ways. It may harden the sinner, make him more stubborn in his way, as we see in Achaz in 28:22, or it may open his eyes to recognize his mistakes. Manasseh's case is the latter, the turn of affairs described by the chronicler in an intensive series of verbs. He entreated and humbled himself, and he prayed, and God received his entreaty and heard and brought him. Then Manasseh knew, ending with a declaration, the Lord is God. These verbs are all put in the third person singular, moving from Manasseh as a subject to the Lord as subject, with no explicit mention of Manasseh until the very last clause. They may serve as a perfect expression of the chronicler's philosophy of history, in which the appropriate reaction to distress is humility and prayer, prompting an immediate and direct response of the Lord, displayed instantly by a concrete change of the historical course. Compare also 2 Chronicles 32, 20, and 21. I also missed verse 11 somehow about Babylon. So the mention of Babylon is strange, since we would have expected Manasseh to be led to Nineveh. Klein writes that this is probably not a geographical blunder, quote-unquote, by the chronicler, since the Bible is clear about the distinction between Assyria and Babylon, and Nineveh is often identified as the capital of Assyria, as we see in 2 Kings 19:36 and Isaiah 37:37. He writes that the association of this event with the later Babylonian exile may have led to Manasseh being given this as a destination. He notes that Dillard suggested that Babylon is a generalized reference to Mesopotamia. Japhet notes that several scholars, like Curtis and Madsen, Rudolph and Ehrlich, see the reference to Babylon as a hint to the rebellion of Shamash Shum Ukin, king of Babylon, in his brother Ashurbanipal. However, according to the Assyrian sources that we have, Manasseh was a loyal vassal of Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal. She writes, however, that this incidental and scant testament can be sufficient.
I mean, it seems very much like what I commented earlier, where you form a narrative about what you want people to do by insisting that people in the past did exactly that. The idea of being rebellious and then being dragged off to Babylon and then repenting when you're in Babylon and then being taken back and being restored to your former position, only humbled now by the greatness of the Lord, is exactly the narrative that they wanted for the entire people of Israel and Judah, to return to the land, having blamed themselves for their captivity and insisted that it was, because of their unfaithfulness to God, and then repenting and then getting everything back the way it was, but maybe better now because, whatever, insert your bullshit narrative here. But it just seems very contrived, this is the path we want you to walk, so we build the heroic character to do the thing. And then you can just all be like him and emulate him. And I mean, people do emulate stories. That is a real method of control.
I'm just glad that Tomer told me that Nineveh is the capital of Assyria. Now I can finally answer that old man and get to cross the bridge.
He didn't ask your favorite color?
Oh, and I should also note that the choch in this verse, so apparently, according to Klein at least, these hooks would be used in the nose or cheek, as confirmed by an Assyrian picture, where Esarhaddon holds Tirhaka and Baal of Tyre with ropes affixed to their lips.
Ugh.
Yeah, not very pleasant.
Dude, what the fuck?
Yeah.
They were really into their humiliation kinks when it came to foreign kings.
Yeah, though it should also be noted
It's like
that
a bull,
sorry.
bull ring. Like a bull has a ring in the nose.
Yeah, but only if they're tamed and my property now. Rawr.
I guess. Also, it should note that Yahweh threatened to put a hook in Sennacherib's nose and a bit in his mouth and send him back to Assyria in 2 Kings 19:28.
Sure,
So,
jam.
Kinky.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, and should note that in Targum, Targum 12 and 13, oh god, I absolutely love it. It reads, Then the Chaldeans made a bronze mule and bored many small holes in it. They shut him up inside it and lit a fire all around it. When he was in distress, he sought help from all his idols which he had made, but there was no help forthcoming, for there is no profit in them. He then changed his mind and prayed before the Lord his God, and etc. etc. Immediately, oh god, I absolutely love it. Immediately, all the angels who had been put in charge of the entrances to the gates of prayer, which are in heaven, went forth, and, because of him, closed all the entrances to the gates of prayer which are in heaven, and all the windows and openings of heaven, so that his prayer would not be accepted.
Okay.
But immediately...
How many asses
fuck's
was
sake.
this pulled out of?
There's more.
Yes.
The angels were like, this prayer is not getting through.
It's the secretary who really doesn't like you.
Yeah,
And somehow your messages are never passed
this is
through.
back when Gandalf was still an angel in heaven, I guess.
Mhm.
You shall not.
But, well, there is more. There is more.
No, go ahead.
Immediately, the mercy of the Lord of the universe prevailed, whose right hand is stretched out to receive the sinners returned to his fear, and who break the inclination of their heart by repentance. And he made an opening and a gap in the heavens beneath the throne of his glory. Don't, Aaron. He heard his prayer and he accepted his request. He shook the universe by his memra. The mule was shattered and he came out from there. Then there went forth a wind from between the wings of the cherubim. It blew him by the decree of the memra of the Lord, and he returned to Jerusalem to his kingdom.
What's
sorry,
Membra?
who?
His foreskin?
Memra, that's
Oh.
the...
I thought you said Membra, like Membra. Okay.
So there is in the Apocalypse of Abraham a verse that talks about prayers not getting through, like God can't hear prayers, and the thing that obscures those prayers is clouds.
Yes. Well, I'm sure
The
the
hosts of
Wi-Fi is
heaven.
the real problem these days. I just, Tomer, that commentary that you just read, who was that from again?
That's the Targum.
The Targum. Okay, well, I would like to
it's
congratulate.
Targum, okay.
I would like to congratulate the Jews on being just as ridiculous as the Christians for once. Well done.
I mean, haven't you caught up to that?
We were ridiculous before they even got on the scene. Like, rude.
Yeah.
Y'all were ridiculous before it was cool. I get it.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. They were the hipsters of ridiculous worship.
Yeah.
Any more? comments?
I think that was a real punishment system. I don't know about a mule.
Oh,
with
the
holes
brazen
in
bull.
it.
Yes.
Yeah, the brazen
Yeah,
bull.
it's
I don't, but I think that's like Greek in origin.
Yeah, or
it's like-
possibly Roman,
Yeah,
but
I
I don't
think the
remember it being
brazen
a
bull
thing
is
in.
Greek.
Yeah, but that I like
Sounds
I
like
like the idea that
something
they
they
had
would
in the Targum was like, how would the fire get inside? You have to put holes in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to just like, do you
Metal.
not have a fucking pot?
And then we have a comment from Perthausen who says, maybe it's not too late to learn how to love and forget how to hate. Better wisdom than any religion book.
Yep, true.
Who
Okay.
sang that?
What was that?
I said, who sang that?
You're kidding, right?
Oh, okay. I thought it was Aussie. I just wanted to confirm. I probably haven't heard. Oh, I just don't know music. So.
Crazy Train?
Oh, okay.
It's
probably
fair.
heard it.
Isaac and I were both kept away from the evils of secular music that might corrupt us.
Exactly.
I'm
Like
just dumb.
the earlier for me, like old music is like Enya. That's the oldest it
Okay,
gets,
that's hilarious.
besides classical.
Okay, where was I? On verse 14, Klein comments, quote, the chronicler puts this building activity after Manasseh's repentance. In this chronological location, it could indicate an expansion of the city due to population growth, a fortification of the city after the Assyrian attack, or establishing Jerusalem as a buffer against Egypt. In Chronicles, faithful kings carry out building projects. Manasseh's efforts continued those of his father Hezekiah to fortify Jerusalem. Kogan thinks that these measures were directed at the increasingly hostile position of Psamtik I, who ruled circa 664 through 610 in Egypt. Theologically, it represents the blessings that come to faithful kings, compare 2 Chronicles 11, 5-12, and the healing of the land that follows repentance, compare 2 Chronicles 7:14. If historically this came earlier in Manasseh's reign, it could mark rebuilding after Sennacherib's attack on Hezekiah, or even preparation for a revolt against Assyria, or as part of an anti-Assyrian coalition. Either chronological location would be congruent with Manasseh's putting commanders in all the Either chronological location would be congruent with Manasseh's putting commanders in all the fortified cities of Judah. On verse 17, Japhet comments, quote, the reservation established in this verse about the imperfection of the people's worship is interesting in several ways. In content and phrasing, it is similar to the Deuteronomistic statements that, quote, the high places were not taken away, the people still sacrificed and burnt incense on the high places, end quote, repeated with slight variations for 6 of the Judean kings, as we see in 1 Kings 15:14 and 22:43, etc. We saw, however, that the chronicler tends to omit these statements and keep them with variation in only 2 cases, 2 Kings 15:17 and 21:3. Here, he adds this reservation of his own, leaving the removal of the high places explicitly for the reform of Josiah, and turning it into the principal aspect of this reform. This is not the impression gained from either the Deuteronomistic record of Josiah's reform in 2 Kings 23, 4-20, or its chronistic adaptation in 2 Chronicles 34, 3-7. But it is certainly a correct inference from the chronicler's record of Manasseh's acts. So it is quite interesting that the emphasis on the centralization of the cult and the abolition of the high places as the focus of Josiah's reform, which has been showcased by scholarly research since the time of Devet, was conceived for the first time by the chronicler in his record of Manasseh's reign.
And for those that don't know, Devet was the German scholar who was the precursor to Wellhausen. So a lot of his ideas Wellhausen took over, and that's how we got to the documentary hypothesis. But it was based on Devet's work.
Okay.
Which is great. So,
On on verse 20, in 2 Kings 21:18, Manasseh is buried in the garden of Uzzah. Klein notes that others, like Shmuel Yavin, identified Uzzah as a shortened form of Uzziah, and this leper king's private garden had been put into service as a graveyard. Dillard notes that Mackay associated the name Uzzah with an Arabian astral deity, whose cult may have been introduced into Jerusalem by Manasseh's wife. Thus, the chronicler's omission could be assigned to his effort to show Manasseh as a reformed king to the end of his life. However, there would be no reason for a similar omission in the case of Ammon's idolatry. He adds that the Garden of Uzzah could be omitted because it was no longer an identifiable area in the topography of Jerusalem during the chronicler's own day. Levin notes that Mackay's opinion, originally by Gray, was later expanded by Becking, who cited the appearance of Uzzah in Persian period Ostraka from Idumea. Becking and Stavrokopoulou agree that the Garden of Uzzah may have been a mortuary garden near the palace, in which some sort of royal ancestor cult was held. I did notice that there is a reference in verse 19 to the words of... So Aaron read the words of the seers, but the Masoretic text has the words of Hosai. So, and JPS has Hosai as a personal name. I don't think
like
You could read it
Hosea
as
is the...
Yes.
You-
Yes.
Okay.
you could read it also as my, like seer, my seer.
Yeah. I mean, I think
Or
Targum
my
has it has.
seers. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Targum reads acts of Hosai. But I think that other commentators say that he that Hosai refers to seers in general, like Kinchi, and is it Botseko? Yeah, kind of like Botseko states.
Steinsaltz translates it as seers. My seers.
Yeah, no, sorry, it's Miyuchas who says that it is the books of the prophets. Though I haven't noticed it, but I do wonder what Peshitta has to say about it, or Septuagint at least. That's verse 19. Yeah, verse 19. Hanan the prophet. Ooh.
Maybe that's the original.
So the comment on by David Phillips, he writes that Peshitta seems to be producing a double rendering. On the one hand, the Hebrew term is linked to chaza, to see, and understood as seer. So Old Greek, ton horonton, which is glossed as usual by prophet. Hanan could have arisen as a corrupt lithography of Chazaya. Interesting. And
See that, I suppose.
yeah, and
So actually, the Masoretic is closer to the original than the Septuagint, is what they're saying.
I mean, not clear. Not really. I mean, several commentators favor reading seer instead of Hosai.
Okay, but Hosai is what would be the normal way of writing would just be Chosim, no? Or
Yeah, Chosima, or That's at
Yeah,
least there is
It's
one
just
Hebrew
missing one
manuscript.
letter.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there is one Hebrew manuscript which actually does read Chozim, though I think it is
Ah.
dated from medieval times. If I'm
Right, but I'm saying
usually it is.
Chozai is a lot is closer to Chozim. It's only one letter difference than Hanan, which is
Yeah.
3 letter difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, one letter
Um,
missing and 2 different.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean Vulgate also has like Ozai, which does read personal name. It could be, though there are like names that have this like Chozai element. You see that Kol Chozei, Nehemiah 3:15, 11:5, Chaziel. It could be an abbreviation of that. But yeah, it's not really clear. I think, but I do think most commentators say that this verse is serious and not specifically to a certain Chozai. Yeah. Okay. And finally, 22 through 23, Levin comments, quote, verses 22 and 23, which tell of Ammon's idolatry, are clearly based on 2 Kings 21, 20 through 22, albeit nonetheless with substantial differences. Obviously, kings could not say that Ammon, quote, did not humble himself before the Lord as his father Manasseh had humbled himself, end quote, since Manasseh's repentance is unknown in Kings. On the other hand, Chronicles does not repent kings as, quote, he abandoned the Lord and God of his fathers, end quote, the God of his fathers, end quote, which might actually indicate that Ammon started out as a loyal Yahwist and only later abandoned his God. The statement that both versions do have in common, and he did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord, as had done Manasseh his father, basically ignores Manasseh's repentance.
That's true.
Fair
Now,
enough. Although
uh,
they had made it kind of his entire personality that he had been evil for long enough to make a difference at any rate, even if he did repent.
He was the longest reigning king of Judah. Was it like 55 years, something like that?
So they almost need the repentance just to justify why he was allowed to reign so long, because a long and healthy reign should be a reward from God for being a good little bitch.
yeah. So, guess who talks about Jesus? It's the ancient Christians again.
No.
We need a jingle.
I do. I actually have in my mind a jingle and
Yeah.
some chords about it.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if I should play it now, but I
Yes,
need to
do
record
it.
it for Peter.
Finalize it. Oh, you want to like send him a recording?
I think it's like goes. Guess who's talking about Jesus? Jesus. Jesus. Guess who's talking about Jesus? It's the ancient Christians again. Something like that.
Okay. That is terribly appropriate.
Yes.
It makes my
Yes.
teeth itch. I hate it, but good job.
And I need to record it, maybe. Okay. So we have Jerome, who said that Hezekiah's son Manasseh shed much innocent blood, but he, like his father and others in the history of the faith, repented of what he had done, was forgiven, and had his kingdom restored. Yeah. I think French expounds on Jerome's comments more, but like I don't want to look at it.
It's the same repentance narrative fits our needs.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he does see him as a genuine convert from evil in his commentary on Zephaniah. No, it is quite complex about Jerome's ambivalence, so I'm not going to go into that in detail. But we do have Gregory of Nazianzus, who says that his baptism of repentant tears was accepted by God, washing away the wickedness he had committed. Of repentant tears. Baptism of repentant tears.
He was baptized with his own
Oh, like
tears.
his tears, like repentant tears.
Yes.
Apparently there is...
It was a baptism of weeping.
I mean, he claims that there are 5 types of baptisms. So there is one of Moses. One of Moses.
But you get covered in manna.
2 is of the Jews. 3. Jesus' baptism. And 4. Martyr's baptism by blood.
Why would the baptism of Moses be different than the baptism of the Jews?
Because Moses is the man of God, apparently, and it's like, I don't know.
What would be the baptism of Moses?
Yeah, I do wonder.
When the waters rushed out of the rock and hit him right in the face.
Yeah.
Wasn't it
When
when
it-
they put him in his basket in the river? Is that what they're talking about?
Could be.
Maybe.
Could be. I'm sure the analogy at least has been made, if nothing
It
else.
could be.
It's
It
not a
could
real
be.
baptism if you don't almost get eaten by a hippopotamus.
Yeah.
Hippo-
Yeah.
Okay,
and
I'm good.
and Chrysostom, who said that if he had despaired, he would have missed all he obtained, but he contended with the devil and finished the race.
Ah, yes. Continue despite whatever horrible thing you might have done. God can forgive you and restore you, yada, yada, yada. It's the same old, same old.
Yeah. Though I do need to note that Augustine, according to French, he considered Manasseh's murder of Isaiah, again assuming that he actually did murder Isaiah, a deadly sin. His treatment of Manasseh shows that there were important exceptions to the church's embrace of Chronicles Manasseh. In Book 18 of City of God, Augustine's survey of Israel's history, Manasseh receives brief mention as the impious king who is said to have slain the prophet. Yeah. So.
Oh, I've read City of God. It's awful.
I mean, if you want to write a history that focuses on the Jews killing their prophets, then that's probably how you would portray him. Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm done. But like, the French has a lot of things about the Manasseh's like reception. So if you have it, you might be interested in that because it's quite interesting. Like a lot of sources about this.
Yeah, and I also mentioned Francesca's book as well. She does go into that. She has a chapter called not chapter. It's a section called Afterlives of Manasseh. Yeah. So you mentioned the murder of Isaiah. Yeah. There's a few other things.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we got one more comment.
Oh yeah, like other stories about murdered prophets. One of the primary functions of the Isaiah legend is to account for the sudden disappearance of Isaiah from the biblical story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Manasseh is also presented as a great interpreter of the law in the story of his appearance in a dream to Rabbi Rav Ashi, in which he teaches the rabbi the answers to highly technical and theological questions.
Yeah, just by the way, the Rav in Rav Ashi means rabbi.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You could just say Rav Ashi or Rabbi Ashi. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, so there are quite a few that she goes into.
We got one more comment from Matthew Karub, who says, hear me roar. No, wait. Just showing my support for all you do and the panel, all you and the panel do. Much love to my friends. Hail Ozzy Aragon, but not forgotten Prince of Darkness.
Aw.
Yeah.
Hail Ozzy.
Yeah.
I
All right.
actually I have to say, even though I haven't heard Black Sabbath, I started like trying to understand Ozzy, or I should also listen to Sabbath's work, but I've seen the Osbournes recently, and I can understand the appeal. Like
They're very funny.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are good for 1 week from today. Moving on to the last 3 chapters of
Yes.
second.
Huzzah!
About time.
Yes.
Don't
I
worry,
have
my
anything.
titties and I will keep God away from us.
I'm going to be so glad when this when this book is finished.
Yeah.
Like 1 titty a day keeps God away, but 2 will finish the sentence.
Yes.
2 will damn you. I'm lucky.
Mhm.
All right.
Mm.
Tomer.
Yes.
Oh, final comments, everybody. Final comments.
The final comment is join my Discord. I don't know about Tomer's. Tomer's Discord sounds like it doesn't even exist at all. Join my Discord. Subscribe to Milwaukee Atheist, the greatest
I think
channel
it's quite
of all time.
I mean, on paper, it's your Discord, but like,
In
the
spirit, too.
consensus
news.
among the participants of
Boys,
it.
do
I will start
need-
banning people who disagree with me.
Tyranny.
Yes.
Um,
Boys, do I need to make you kiss and make up?
yes.
We do that by ourselves. All right, Lilith?
Yes. We do it in a platonic manner.
Yeah, we don't need your permission. We're just broing out sometimes.
Yeah,
Yes.
you know, bros aren't real bros unless they give bros tongue, right?
Damn straight.
This
Okay.
is
Also,
real
Kip-
news.
Kip
They-
is still here.
Yes.
And he acknowledges me as the rightful owner. The Milwaukee Atheist Discord it is. Also, Kip, if you didn't hear me earlier, get me on Dapper Dino Show.
Or me as well. I mean, whoever you think is more appropriate, me.
And
I have
Tomer,
I'm almost getting a
Tomer.
master's. Yes.
Say goodbye to the nice people.
Goodbye or else.